The world thinks this is just politics. But what if it's something much bigger? Behind every handshake, every tariff, every speech, there's a silent psychological war unfolding between two of the most powerful men on earth, Donald Trump and Xi Jinping. This isn't only about America versus China. It's about dominance, influence, fear, control, and the terrifying reality that the future of the global economy may depend on who blinks first. One leader uses unpredictability like a weapon. The other uses patience like a strategy. One thrives in chaos. The other masters silence. But here's what most people fail to see. The real battle is not happening on television. It's happening behind closed doors, inside economic systems, military calculations, artificial intelligence, trade routes, and the minds of billions watching around the world. And as tensions rise again, the question is becoming impossible to ignore. Are we witnessing strategic leadership or the beginning of a global power shift that could change the world forever? Because when giants compete for control, ordinary people always feel the consequences first. And by the end of this video, you may realize this conflict was never just political. It was psychological from the very beginning. The most dangerous wars are the ones people cannot see. While the world watches military drills, trade agreements, and political speeches, the real battle between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping is happening inside the human mind. Because power today is no longer only about weapons. It is about who can appear stronger, calmer, more dominant under pressure. Men understand this instinctively. Since the beginning of history, men have competed for status because status creates influence, and influence creates survival. A man who controls the narrative often controls the room before he even speaks. Strong leaders know that emotion moves people faster than logic. Trump projects unpredictability because unpredictable men are difficult to challenge. Xi projects silence because silent men force others to reveal themselves first. One creates tension loudly. The other creates tension quietly. And people around the world respond emotionally to both approaches without even realizing it. Men see strength and instinctively measure it. Women observe stability and instinctively analyze its consequences. Because when powerful men compete, women often become the emotional readers of danger long before society admits it exists. Fear has always been one of the greatest psychological weapons ever created. Not fear of war itself, but fear of uncertainty, collapse, humiliation, weakness, and losing control. Chaos is often mistaken for weakness, when in reality it can be a strategy of dominance. Donald Trump understands something most leaders fear. When people cannot predict your next move, they become emotionally reactive. And reactive people are easier to control. Trump speaks loudly, changes direction suddenly, and creates tension constantly because chaos keeps attention locked on him. Many men are drawn to this kind of energy because deep inside, men are taught that confidence means taking space, breaking rules, and refusing to appear afraid. Even when the room feels unstable, the loudest man often appears strongest. Silence, however, can create a completely different kind of power. Xi Jinping rarely rushes emotionally because calmness under pressure signals control. Men who stay silent force others to reveal their emotions first. That is why silence can feel intimidating. Women often notice this psychological difference faster than men do. They observe how one man dominates through force while another dominates through restraint. One demands attention immediately. The other slowly shapes the environment until everyone feels his presence without words. Both approaches trigger something ancient inside human psychology, the instinct to follow the person who appears most certain in uncertain times. Money has become the modern version of power, and the global economy is now the battlefield where nations fight without firing bullets. Donald Trump and Xi Jinping both understand that controlling trade, technology, and manufacturing creates something greater than wealth. It creates influence over human behavior. Because when economies shake, people emotionally react. Fear spreads faster. Loyalty changes faster. And leaders gain power by convincing people they alone can restore stability. Men especially feel this pressure deeply because many men are raised to believe their value is connected to their ability to provide, protect, and stay in control during uncertain times. Economic tension does not only affect governments, it changes psychology inside homes, relationships, and everyday conversations. When jobs feel threatened and prices rise, men often internalize stress silently because society teaches them to carry pressure without showing weakness. Women, however, frequently sense emotional instability before men admit it openly. They notice shifts in energy, patience, confidence, and security. This is why economic conflict becomes personal so quickly. A tariff is never just a tariff to ordinary people. Behind every financial decision is a deeper emotional question about survival, identity, and who will still appear strong when the world feels unstable. National pride becomes dangerous when leaders stop protecting people and start protecting their own image. Donald Trump and Xi Jinping both understand that people emotionally attach themselves to symbols of strength. Flags, speeches, economic victories, military power. These things are not only political tools, they are psychological triggers. Men especially respond strongly to pride because many men are raised to believe respect must be defended at all costs. The moment pride feels threatened, emotion can overpower logic. And when powerful men lead emotional crowds, compromise starts to look like weakness instead of wisdom. Ego becomes even more dangerous when entire nations begin thinking like wounded individuals. A man with unchecked pride often refuses to back down because backing down feels humiliating. Nations can behave the same way. Women often recognize this emotional shift earlier because they tend to focus less on dominance and more on consequences. They notice how pride changes communication, patience, and empathy. One side wants to prove superiority, the other refuses to appear vulnerable. And suddenly, the conflict is no longer about economics or strategy. It becomes personal. That is how psychological battles grow larger than the original issue itself. When leaders stop asking what is right and start asking who looks stronger in front of the world. Fear becomes most powerful when people cannot clearly see where the danger is coming from. Donald Trump and Xi Jinping understand that modern control is no longer built only through military force. It is built through uncertainty. When people constantly hear about economic collapse, political tension, cyber threats, trade wars, and global instability, their minds slowly shift into survival mode. And once people enter survival mode, they stop thinking long term. They become emotionally reactive. Fearful populations search desperately for certainty, and powerful leaders know this. Men are especially vulnerable to this kind of psychological pressure because many men are conditioned to believe they must always remain strong, prepared, and in control. The moment uncertainty enters their financial future, their status, or their ability to protect their families, stress begins attacking their identity itself. A fearful man often becomes easier to influence because fear pushes him to seek authority, structure, and strong leadership. Women, however, often experience fear differently. They tend to notice emotional instability before physical danger appears. They observe tension in communication, behavior, patience, and emotional presence long before society openly acknowledges the pressure. Silence also becomes a weapon when fear is involved. A leader does not always need to threaten people directly. Sometimes all it takes is creating the feeling that something bigger could happen at any moment. Because the human mind will often imagine dangers far greater than reality itself. Fear controls millions most effectively when people begin policing their own thoughts, emotions, and actions without ever being forced physically. The future of the world may depend on one terrifying question. What happens when powerful men care more about winning than understanding the cost of victory? Donald Trump and Xi Jinping are not just competing politically, they are competing psychologically. Both men represent different models of power, different definitions of strength, and different visions of global leadership. But beneath strategy, economics, and diplomacy lies something deeply human: ego, pride, fear, legacy, and the need to appear unshakable in front of the world. Men often grow up believing that respect must be earned through dominance. From childhood, many men are taught never to appear weak, never to lose control, and never to back down publicly. This mindset can create resilience, but it can also create dangerous blind spots. Because when powerful men become emotionally attached to being right, compromise starts feeling like humiliation instead of wisdom. The pressure becomes even greater when billions of people are watching. Every speech becomes a test of strength. Every decision becomes tied to identity. And when identity mixes with power, logic can quietly disappear behind emotion. Women often recognize the emotional consequences of this behavior faster than men do. They notice how pride changes communication, how silence creates tension, and how fear slowly spreads through societies before conflict even begins. While many men focus on competition itself, women frequently focus on the emotional damage left behind by the competition. They understand that the atmosphere inside homes, relationships, and communities changes long before headlines confirm it publicly. Powerful nations do not collapse only because of weapons or economic pressure. Sometimes they collapse because leaders become trapped inside the psychological need to prove superiority at all costs.